Welcome back to From Husbands to Dads.
From Husbands to Dads. Hi, I'm Steven,
I'm Brett,
and we are the Broadway
Broadway Husbands,
Husbands.
and we want to talk about the path to parenthood
Yeah,
because for so many people, it's
it's just a one and done,
it's a one and done,
in and out, and you're pregnant.
and for a lot of people, it's not. And for us,
And for two men, guess what? It's not like that. You guessed it. It's not that easy.
there's of course most people think of two choices when it comes to building a family for same-sex dads, especially, and that is surrogacy or adoption.
Adoption, yeah.
We we decided to go the path of surrogacy, which we'll talk more about in further episodes,
Mm-hmm.
but it was not an easy decision. And we thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about that pathway for us when we first started, because we knew, well, what year was it that we went to the LGBTQ Center's event around family building?
I think that was in like 2016
Yeah,
or
or 2015.
2015. It may have been, yeah, it was a long time ago.
And we were like, okay, we're just going to go get more information. And we found out that the Gay and Lesbian Center had this, it was free event where they would just talk about the differences of surrogacy and adoption and
Yeah, of
kind of way.
fostering, and yeah.
But that's the thing. People say surrogacy and adoption like it's two choices, but there's so much nuance to both that you don't even realize, right?
Yeah.
Like surrogacy is not just a one thing. There's the process of egg donors and IVF, and then there's who's going to carry it, and there's all that.
Yeah.
Then adoption, there's foster to adopt,
Yeah.
there's open adoption. There's a lot of nuance to all of this. And if you've gone a non-conventional route of building a family, you understand that. But I think that so many people don't.
Yeah, well, and also like it's interesting, like for me personally, I can remember going to that informational meeting and always thinking that we would just adopt. And I think I even left that thinking that we would just adopt. I think at the time we had friends of ours who were trying to have a child through surrogacy, and we would hear what they were going through in their journey, and it sounded like a lot. And I remember just thinking like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And then I don't really know like really what changed, but so that was probably in like 2015. And then I remember in around 2017, there was definitely like a voice inside me that was like, we need to have a child. We need to have a child. I want to have a child. Like, it was just like burning inside of me. And then we watched the movie Other People with Molly Shannon. And the movie is about a mother dying of cancer. And she has a gay son and a daughter, a straight daughter, but and a daughter. And the movie focuses on the relationship between the gay son and the mother. And at the end, she's on her deathbed. So it's not the typical Molly Shannon movie. It's not Mary Catherine Gallagher, but she's on her deathbed, and she says to her son, "Promise me you'll always come see your sister, because when you do, you'll always see me in her." And there's something like just so beautiful about that, and and I think that it felt just like a path we wanted to try. Because at the time, like whether it was God or whether it was intuition or I don't know what, but it was like my head wouldn't stop saying, have a baby, have a baby, have a baby, you have a baby, or whatever it was. I don't know if it was that, but it was that message. And then we saw that movie, and I was literally like, we need to start this now. What do we need to do? And that was kind of like how it happened. That was the switch. That's all that it took. And so we decided that we would
Well,
start.
we knew another family who had recently had a child, and they got some help from Men Having Babies, which was another organization that helps two dad families. So they have a big convention thing in New York City, and I signed us up to go. I think you were in a show at the time, and I was
Yeah, you went
unemployed.
by yourself, yeah.
And so I went by myself, and one of the fertility doctors had reached out, and he just seemed really nice. And he said, let's just talk. And so we talked, and he was a gay dad himself. And he answered a lot of my questions, and I was like, maybe you're our doctor. And that's who actually became our fertility doctor,
Mm.
Dr. Leanderis. We weren't sure still that we would want to do surrogacy because of the cost. Like that was the one thing that we kept thinking of whenever meeting people and talking about it. I was like, it's going to cost you 150K. Now it's probably more. And we were like, we don't have that kind of money. We are actors. Like our shows close in a heartbeat, and then we have to figure out how we're going to make ends meet. And he was the one who was like, you don't have to come up with that money up front. We could do this in small increments and see how far we get. And I was like, I love that. Let's
And
just try it.
yeah, and that's kind of like the agreement that Brett and I made with each other was like, let's just start. And if we get to like the biggest hurdle that we don't know how to overcome, then at least we tried.
Yeah,
And
and then
that's
became
how
to
we did.
say, you know what? And then we'll just adopt.
Yeah.
If we can't do
Or
it, we
we'll
can't
figure
afford
out,
it.
yeah, we'll figure out something. Yeah.
So
We know we want to have a baby. Let's just start here and see what happens.
part of the genetic choice for me was like a biological decision making for me. Stevens was very emotional, but I also have a brother who has a genetic intellectual disability that's passed through genes, and it's something I was super nervous about. And so there's another option, another reason why, going the route of surrogacy can be good is that you can eliminate a lot of, you can at least try to eliminate, you can always the risks of certain types of diseases or disabilities because they can do all that DNA testing before you do any sort of transfer. And so that was one thing for me was, I grew up with a brother who I love very much, but that intellectual disability and the stress of that growing up as a child, I just don't know that I had it in me to do it again. And that's not to say that I couldn't, because I will love my child no matter what, and I will be there for him. In fact, I think that having a brother with a disability has taught me how to be much more patient and calm with my toddler at this moment. I think if I hadn't had that experience with my brother, I probably wouldn't be able to handle a lot of the moments that I do handle, I think, smoother than most. But who's to know, right? But that was another reason why I thought let's look into biological family building and see. But
And
adoption, a lot of people I know who decided to adopt, and one of the stories that stood out to me from that event at the LGBTQ plus center was this woman who said, when I was afraid that because this child was not mine, and um, I adopted her, and she, the mother, I literally just drove to the hospital and had never met the woman and came home with this baby. And I remember her saying, like, there was a day where I looked at this child and I said, this is mine. I love this child with all my heart. So I know adoption is no different. Like
mm-hmm.
your attachment to your child
Yeah,
is your attachment to your child, and you're going to love them
no matter what.
wholeheartedly no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's why we thought it would be great to have our guest today from Gays with Kids, Brian Rosenberg, who has built an entire platform, the GWK Academy Family Building. It's a nonprofit spinoff of his popular Gays with Kids website and a virtual community that he launched in 2014. Brian has opened up his academy to not just gay dads, but to all families to learn all their options. So there's a lot of education videos on not just adoption. We're going to talk mostly about adoption today because that's not something we had the most experience about.
Mm-hmm.
But you can learn a lot about your path to family building and your options, regardless of your gender, regardless of your sexuality, through the GWK Academy. So we want to make sure you can go to gwkacademy.org and check that out. But here is our interview with
Brian Rosenberg.
Hi, Brian. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, we do know Gays with Kids offers all kinds of amazing solutions for however people choose to build their family. But we wanted to talk to you specifically about adoption because we don't specifically have that experience and haven't been through that experience. And we thought who better to go to than the founder of Gays with Kids.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
So adoption is often surrounded by myths. What are some common misconceptions about adoption that you've encountered, especially for LGBTQ plus parents?
Sure, that's a great question. I think the first thing is, LGBTQ plus people can't adopt. which and many people assume that adoption agencies won't work with us. Well, to be honest with you, many won't. I think it's 1 in 4 agencies are LGBTQ plus are open to working with LGBTQ plus families. I think another thing is, birth parents are not going to choose LGBTQ plus folks. And here's what I say to that. When you think about it, when a birth parent is getting ready to find someone to take over parenting their child, who better than someone, each and every one of us, just by the fact of who we are, and we've had to somehow come to terms with who we are and that we're different than other. We all have some level of resilience and inner strength that it took for us to get to where we are today. And so I think that actually attracts us often to people who are, not forget the people who are really religious, obviously, but everyone else. I think that actually helps attract us to others. So those are 2 myths I just busted there. I don't even know why I'm going to say this, but children need a mom and a dad. Well, I start that. I didn't even counter that when I started with kids 10 and a half years ago. Like, we know that's just not true. And I think some people are concerned. So when we're talking about adoption, I know we're going to get into it later on. There are several types of adoption, right? It's not always with a newborn baby. And I think some people are afraid, or they make the argument that if you adopt an older kid or a child, they're not going to be LGBTQ plus friendly. You know what? All kids in the foster care system want is a safe, loving, nurturing home. So I think those are the misconceptions that are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of already started talking about this. Many people think adoption is only about giving a child a better home. Can you explain why adoption is also about building a family and creating bonds? And I think you kind of started to talk about that.
Yes. So, first of all, there are several different routes to adoption, right? You can adopt domestically. You can adopt a newborn infant. You can do that with an agency. Some people like to do what's called an independent adoption, where they're actually working with more with an attorney. You can adopt from the foster care system. The foster care system, there are over 400. There are about 375,000 children in the U.S. foster care system alone. The whole point of the foster care system is what's called reunification, that the child in the system is eventually reunified with some birth family member. Could be parents, grandparents, cousins. Honestly, it could be a great second grade English teacher or a little league coach, whomever was in that, life at some point when things were going all right. But the truth of the matter is, many kids will never be reunified. There is no one for them to be reunified with. And it turns out there are over 100,000. So more than 25% of the kids in the system are going to be what's called freed up for adoption. And those kids run the age. I mean, there are some kids who go in the system as soon as they're born. Our son almost did. And you can be in the system up until the age of majority, and that differs by state. In some states, it's 18. It could be 21. So they're kids all ages, although the average age is probably about 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. So there's that. And then, of course, there's intercountry adoption. There are 3.5 countries in the world that openly embrace LGBTQ plus folks from other countries to adopt children, their citizens who have been freed up for intercountry adoption. That is Colombia, South Africa, Brazil, and a few states in Mexico, hence the 3.5 that we could adopt as well. So
just explaining all of the different options people have, and I think that most people don't realize, especially internationally, that there's really not that many options outside of the United States.
Also, I guess kind of going back to the question that we asked is like, how does intended parents or adoptive parents, sorry, I'm using the wrong terminology, adoptive parents who are adopting a child who is older, what is the process for them to get to know the child? Like, how many visits or experiences do they have with the child before they go into their home?
Sure, that differs, and it depends on the agency and where in the state, et cetera. But I will tell you this, it's a very intentional process. So there are a couple of things. Remember I told you out of the 300 and something children, there are 16,000 or 13,000 freed up for adoption. So you can sign up in the foster agency and say, I only want to work, or I only want to be matched with a child who's already freed up for adoption. Not every agency, most agencies will not allow that, but there are some that do. And in fact, there's one in New York City. You got to believe they only work with kids who are already freed for adoption. And they have this, it's called You Gotta Believe. They're awesome. And they have this whole process by which they start, like, it's all about building a forever family from the get-go. They don't even call themselves foster kids because these kids are free for adoption and they're going to go right in. But, and then in terms of when you're a foster parent, and again, those could be from babies to age of majority, you don't know how long you're going to take this child in. You have no idea whether they're going to be with you for a day or 3 years. And even though you may hope your goal might ultimately be to become a forever family, to become parents to someone, the point of the foster care system as a foster parent is not to build your family. It's to support the child and the original birth family instead.
Right.
And so they're going to have the child already. And then what will happen is it turns out while the child is living with them, they become freed for adoption and then they start the process. So they're already there.
Got it.
There are instances where, people are sort of matched with kids who are free for adoption and they haven't been living with them. And that's a whole different ball of wax. And, it, depends on the state. Everyone's got their own practices, but I can tell you it's a very deliberate process of connecting the two. And that's one of the cool things about adoption is when you are finally a family, like you've got all this experience and time together already, and you've gone through it together. And I think it just creates, honestly, a stronger bond.
And that's fascinating.
Beautiful. Yeah.
What do you think are some misconceptions about birth parents in adoption scenarios?
Sure. So several. I think that a lot of, well, I'll be honest with you. So every state has its own laws. When a birth mom gives birth to her baby that she puts up for adoption, so first I want to talk about an infant, the newborn infant adoption, and then we'll talk about kids adoption. So with a birth mom, depending on what state she's in, she has an opportunity to change her mind. So for example, in New York State, she can have 30 days. And we actually know someone who had a baby for 29 days and then the birth mom changed her mind. When we adopted our son in New York State, and we were so nervous that his birth mom was going to want him back because we fell in love right away, that we had to write letters for the first 4 weeks, once a week, then once a month for the first 6 months. And we kept like, oh, he's okay, we're having an all right time. He cries a lot or whatever. And the adoption said, are you guys not doing well? I'm like, no, we just don't want the birth mom to want to take him back. That's not the case. So the birth parents so I think what everyone's concerned is the birth parent's going to come and take the kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Second thing is they're concerned that the birth parent's going to be in their lives. Well, you guys are dads now. So you already know what I'm about to share, which is we cannot have enough positive people in our children's lives who love them. There's no such thing as having too many. So if a birth family wants to stay in your child's life, that's freaking awesome. Like, you're lucky to have that. And we know people who the grandparents are involved and the aunts and cousins and uncles. So like all different permutations. So in terms of foster to adopt, I think, there's the misconception that, first of all, I should tell you, every child, and I told you, they're all run the gamut age, and when they started in the system. The one thing, though, that they all have in common is that not one child deserves to be in the foster care system. They are all there through no fault of their own. I think people hear that and they think, oh, then the parents are no good. And, and I think that's a misconception. These are people going through hard times. Some of them are doing pretty bad things, but they're going through hard times. And I think as the adoptive parents, a potential prospective adoptive parents, we really need to show a lot more empathy and to those families. We don't know what's going on what their lives have been like before they came to this moment in time where you took over the children's care. So,
wow. And then those are things that I think most people don't even think about, right? Like, and it's so good that we're having this conversation. Now, do you think that there are particular challenges or benefits for LGBTQ plus couples when considering domestic adoption versus international adoption?
Well, so biggest thing, as I said earlier, there are 3.5 countries in which we can adopt as out and proud people. I am a firm believer, like I shouldn't say that. I don't judge how people want to build their families. And years ago, it was much more challenging. And so people had they would go. I know couples where one of them would go to the country and adopt and do all the paperwork, and then they come back because that was the only way it was going to happen. That being said, I love going. I was at Columbia. Spence Chapin, one of our adoption family building partners, the oldest adoption agency in the country. Not only do they do domestic infant adoption, but they also do intercountry adoption. They brought me to Columbia with them 6 weeks ago, and I got to visit these different child protection services institutions, think orphanages, but half the kids were in the system, were going to go back to their families and the others were not. And they were going to need to be adopted. And a lot of those kids would not be adopted from the country. Why? Because they have special needs, sibling groups. Quite frankly, the kids of color have a harder time. The darker kids have a harder time getting adopted there as well. It's crazy. So we have to worry. You have to worry about the fact that there are just 3.5 countries.
Yeah.
Secondly, you do have to worry. Not only do you have to all the adoption laws in your home state in the U.S., but you're also managing the adoption laws in their home state. So, but when I was at this, I'll tell you what I learned is Colombia has the worst rates of domestic violence in the world. I met kids and women who had really been through the ringer. I mean, I could tell you, I met this one poor boy. He had cigarette burns up and down his back from his mom's boyfriend. He was blind because he had hit him so hard that his retinas detached. And you know what he did when we came up to him? He gave us each a hug. And these other kids, they come running up to us. They want high fives and hugs and to play. And I'm throwing them up in the air. And I realized even these kids who had been through the ringer, and they really have been, all they wanted and all they deserved, just love and support and fun. And so I think that whether you're doing it domestically from the system or you're doing it internationally, you know that you're going to be just taking care of kids who are at the most vulnerable points in their lives. So that's really it. I mean, other than the fact that, it's going to cost you a little bit more too, because these countries have rules about how long you have to stay there for and how long the paperwork is going to be there. It could be, I just forget, it's like 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the country. So, but a lot of people, as I understand it, who adopt internationally tend to do it because they've got some kind of relationship with that country. Maybe they're of Colombian descent or South African descent. Maybe their boyfriend is, or they speak the language, or some way that they really feel connected, and therefore they want to go into country. It doesn't matter if there are options here.
Wow. For many LGBTQ plus couples, the choice comes down to adoption versus surrogacy or biological parenting. What are some advantages and challenges of adoption over other family building methods? And can you also, you started to talk about just the financials of it all. Surrogacy can be quite pricey, and can you just kind of walk us through some of the cost adoption?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll start by saying here, GWK Academy, we support and we celebrate all paths to family building. We recognize that the decision that people make is a deeply, deeply personal one. And let's face it, it's often rooted in our own experiences, right? Based on that, honestly, what may be a benefit to one person is not going to be a benefit to someone else. What may be considered a challenge to someone is not going to be that big of a challenge to someone else. So it's hard to say, what are the biggest advantages and challenges. What I will do, though, when it comes to financials, that is definitely plays a big role. So what I could tell you, starting at the top, surrogacy and IVF. For someone who's just getting started on a surrogacy and IVF journey today in the United States, I prepare them to spend somewhere between $150,000 and $240,000. Now, I know you're both thinking, Brian, that's a really rather wide gap there. And I would say you're right, it is. As you guys know, though, the issue is that there are a lot of variables in a surrogacy journey, some of which you can control and some of which you cannot.
A lot of which most of which you cannot.
You guys learned the hard way, I know. And so that is certainly one, and it makes that does become a barrier for a lot of people, for sure. an adoption, so domestic infant adoption or domestic agency adoption, around $40,000 to $50,000.
And then what about international? Do you have a ballpark?
International is around the same. The difference is, remember I told you you're going to have to go to the country, you have to stay there for a while.
Right.
So whatever those costs are, plus the 40 to 50,000 that I mentioned for a domestic includes all the legal stuff here. So I don't remember if it's $5,000 to $10,000 extra on legal that you're going to spend there as well.
Yeah.
And then the last is foster adopt. So on a very positive note, the system is created to have to make it as easy as possible for people to become parents through the foster care system. Therefore, it doesn't cost any money. And not only does it not cost any money, but the state will give you a stipend and they'll pay you for certain living expenses and educational and medical stuff. How much varies by state, so I can't tell you what the exact dollar amount is.
Sure.
But yeah, the only thing you might have to come up with is getting whatever, when you have a child coming in, making sure you have whatever is needed for that child. And maybe as part of your home study, some of the background check you'll have to pay for. But really, for the most part, it's negligible.
Wow. Are there anything besides the financial benefits that you see between the two biological journeys or adoptive journeys?
So again, it's just, I know people that wanted to adopt because their parents were adopted. They were adopted. Their best friends adopted. Their spouses adopted. And they're just not, like, it doesn't scare them. They're very familiar with it. I know other people who choose surrogacy and IVF. Number one, they do want to have a biological connection. But in addition to that, they feel like there's more control. And there are, as we talked about, a lot of variables, right, that you have no control over. But you can control, like, your egg donor, the surrogate, you and the surrogate get to choose each other. Whereas with birth moms, she's going to ultimately choose you. You could say no to the child if the, that situation is not one that you're comfortable with, but she's still running the show up until whatever state she lives in, what their laws are about giving up. And so I think that scares people. They feel like they have even less control in an adoption journey.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, God, it's like got my brain like. So specifically, what are like some of the biggest challenges LGBTQ plus parents face during the adoption process, and how can they prepare for them? Are there barriers specific to gay parents? I'm sure it varies state to state. Can you, off the top of your head, do you know of any specific state laws that are more extreme than others?
Yeah. So Family Equality has a great map where they show all the laws that are in place to protect us or not, to protect our children or not. So there are states that indirectly or directly limit adoption by LGBTQ plus folks. They allow child welfare agencies to refuse placements with us, quite frankly, based on religious beliefs. There are other states that protect us, which that I don't get. Like I told you, there are 375,000 kids in the foster care system.
Right.
113 or 19,000 freed up for adoption. These kids, and I'll tell you, the kids, 20% every year of all the foster care kids age out. And when they age out, they've not been matched with a birth family. Yeah. And the statistics about what happens to these kids is dismal. And it's so sad and so scary.
These states are purposefully creating another barrier for them.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's awful. So that's one. Number two, also adoption agencies. I told you earlier, it's like 1 in 4. I can tell you when I started GWK Academy, the first 2 conversations I had were with 2 couples. One was they were actually both doing foster care journeys, foster adopt. One was in like the South somewhere, and one was somewhere in the Midwest, but both red states. They didn't realize they had to do their homework about the agencies. They just went online, and the closest one to them is the one they went with. So 2.5 years into this, both of them, one was 2 years, one was 2.5, they had not been matched with a foster care kid yet. Remember, there are
Right.
400,000, 339,000 kids in the system who all need temporary shelter at the very least. And when they called them on this, they went back to their agency. What's going on? The guy at the agency said, "Well, I never promised you that you would have a kid. You'd be matched with a kid." So clearly, they were not a religious-based agency, so they couldn't deny working with them. They couldn't say no. However, they're not LGBTQ
Right.
plus they're not friendly at all, and they're clearly, and so they would have just kept them waiting in the system
So
indefinitely.
it's like going to a church and when they say all are welcome, but we don't,
Or we don't affirm.
we don't affirm.
Yeah.
LGBTQ+.
But so how would you suggest families overcome any of these biases or specific laws?
Yeah.
Well, so the laws could be a challenge, but if you live in one of those states, you're going to have to deal with it. I'll tell you though, there's a couple of things. So number one is, in every state, even the reddest of red states, there still are organizations and people and agencies that want the best for these kids and know that that includes LGBTQ plus families. What we do at GWK Academy is we have this network that's always growing of agencies across the country. And if we don't know them, if we don't know of any, we go to HRC has a list. We go to the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. They have a list of agencies that they fund. And I've been told by the CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, if anyone I know goes to check one of their agencies out and they are not completely inclusive, I'm to tell her because she's going to get back to them and they're going to lose their funding. So from her. So
That's great.
there are ways. And so I think when I tell people, it's critically important that you work with agencies that embrace LGBTQ plus family building. And, I think it's kind of easy to tell. You go to their websites. Do they have families like ours? And then you go to the social media sites. Do they have,
that's true.
and if you don't see any families that look like the one you want to build,
Stay away.
run away. Yeah, exactly.
Hey friends, quick pause from today's episode to tell you about something really special that we built just for you.
If you've been loving these convos on Husbands to Dads, then you'll definitely want to check out the Broadway Husbands Neighborhood on Substack. That's where we get even deeper with our weekly joy chats and where it's just us, real talk, real life, and a little sparkle.
Plus, we host a monthly community dance class. Yes, you heard that right. Whether you're a total beginner or just love moving your body with other people, it's joyful, it's low pressure, and it's full of love.
Plus, every week we share thoughtful articles and newsletters on parenting, queerness, creativity, and community. Basically, everything that makes this little corner of the internet so special.
So if you're ready to be more connected, more supported, and maybe even just bust a move with us,
come join us on Substack. Just head to broadwayhusbands.substack.com or click on the link in the show notes. We'll see you in the neighborhood.
For families pursuing foster to adopt, how should they prepare for the possibility of reunification with the biological family?
All right. So it's a good question because it gets asked all the time. So remember what I said, the goal of the foster care system is reunification. So everyone going into this, unless they happen to, they're connected with You Got to Believe and they know they're only going to be matched with an older kid who's already free for adoption, or they happen to find one of the few agencies that says, okay, you only want to be matched with someone free, that's great, we'll do that. Everyone else, which is the vast majority of people, will be working with an agency or, government entity that will tell them, you just need to, I understand you want to become a forever family, but we have this kid who needs a place to sleep tonight. Not freed up for adoption. Who knows what's going to happen? So if you want to become a foster parent, that's what you got to do, is you got to give this person a loving and safe home right away. So everyone going into this, really, all these agencies give major trainings. Everyone knows that the idea is that these kids are going to be reunified. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen, and then in that case, maybe they can adopt them. But the goal is, their job as a foster parent is to support the reunification process and to have empathy for the family and help that take place. And I will tell you, does it hurt their hearts when they lose the kids who've been there with them for a while? Absolutely. I've talked to a ton of people through GWK about this, but it also, they know that they took a child who was at its most vulnerable time, right? It was at the worst time in his or her their lives, and they gave this child a safe, loving, supportive environment, and they took care of this child until they're ready to move on. And while it's sad and hurts to see them go, they know that they did something super special for this kid. And when foster care, when the system really works, and I don't mean to suggest that it really works all the time, because it definitely doesn't. But when it really works, they still get to stay connected with the kids even after they go back to their families.
Also, at what age typically do kids get freed up for adoption? You're kind of talking about like as they got a little bit older. Is there a typical age that kids?
So I know that the average age child in the foster care system is 8 or 9. So
Okay.
I think that I forget the average time they're in there. It's over 2 years or around 2
Got
years. So, but remember, many of the kids do not, right? So it's of the 300 and something children, 75,000 children in the foster care system, about 113,000 right now are going to get freed up for adoption. And those never stay around. Actually, there's fewer people going. There used to be over 400,000 kids in the system pre-COVID. So it's hard to say. You just know that there's going to be over 100,000 kids in the near future who are freed for adoption, all different ages.
How should families navigate difficult conversations about being a same-sex family with their adopted children, particularly if they're in less inclusive environments?
Good question. So, and I presume you're talking about when they adopt from the foster care system, so they've got a kid who's older. Because when you adopt a baby, a newborn, we're going to have the same conversations.
Right.
We're going to raise the kid the same way as
any parent.
Right, exactly. So, again, the agency, when you're working with the right agency, they'll start the process and they'll explain that, and you'll just continue the conversations. There are lots of different, families come in all shapes and sizes. Some have one parent, some have two parents. Some have two dads, some have two moms. Some have a mom and a dad. And they just really explain it like that. Kids, like, it's a 2-second conversation, depending on how old they are. It's really like a 2-second conversation. I've always been I remember when our kids were younger and they were in elementary school, and like someone would say, "Wait, I haven't seen a mom. Like, what's going on?" And they'd be like, "Well, we don't have them. We have two dads." "Oh, really? Oh, okay." And then they go play. Like, it's not a big deal. We make it a big deal. People make it the adults make it a big deal. For kids, it's not at all. You just show them it's a loving family. And that's all that matters. And you're going to talk about yourselves. And, I think it's really important. And this is where I'd say it gets a little trickier-ish. So I live in Massachusetts, the bluest of bluest states, right? Wherever we go, my husband and I, when we're talking about if he's at school or something, or if he's out doing something, he always refers to his husband. And he goes out of his way to make sure people know he's gay. Or he'll talk about he'll say, Sadie's got two dads, or Sadie's other dad. He'll mention "Oh, well, I'm going to go with Sadie's other dad. She's got two dads." He makes a big deal out of saying that. That might be a little uncomfortable for folks, but I think you need to if you're going to be willing to be a parent and you live in a community like this, you have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, and you have to show your kids it's no big deal. You have to be the role model for them. And what I've heard from people like you guys who live in red states is that, I know what happens at the election level, but when it goes to the individual communities, people are treated well and they make friends and they're just as an important member of the community as everyone else. And
it's true. It's true. I have a question for, especially someone who is part of a community as an adopted parent, like, for someone who's an ally, maybe who is a parent whose kid goes to school with your kid, or is part of your parenting group, and it's pretty obvious maybe that your child was adopted because of skin color or because of whatever other reasons that might come off or might be identifiable to someone outside. What should or shouldn't they ask or say to another parent in regards to adopting?
So it's a great question, because years ago, one of the first things we did, like our first year of Gays with Kids, was we created a video, things people ask gay dads. And
I remember this.
and there was all questions that people had literally asked us. And so then I'm like, all right, maybe it's just us. So I did a poll to the community, like on Facebook back in the day, and found and every scene and the things people ask gay dads had happened to a bunch of other people. So certainly you don't want to ask, how much did your family cost? Who plays the mom? Who's the mom? I know it's great that you adopted, but you don't love the adopted kid the way you love the biological kids, right? Like there's just not comparison.
Oh,
I mean, or for the case of the biological, whose sperm was it? Like it's none of anyone else's business. So I think that kind of stuff you stay away from, but I think it's perfectly legit to, like you said, like our son is black and my husband and I are white. So everybody knows Levi was adopted, and we're very comfortable talking about it. So just stuff that's not like personal, that is like, someone else, I told you we live in a most progressive state in the country. And the first day of the elementary school, we moved here 7 years ago. I'm going to say well-meaning, but who knows? Mom came up to my husband and I when we were dropping off the kids. And she said, so who does the mommy stuff? And so like, are you serious? So I think it's okay to acknowledge when there's a conversation going on, especially with the child, to say the child, families are built in all different kinds of ways. Some families, the baby comes out of a mommy's belly. Other families comes out of a different person's belly. But these families, the one thing they have in common is they're all made with love. And I think you just talk that kind of stuff. And you have the books. There's so many. How do I know? So many. Because people still tell us, they still write to us and say, I didn't think there were enough books out there, so I'm going to write another one. And that's good because we can't have enough. But so there's so many books out there that celebrate diverse families and stuff. So, have one of those books around and have that kind of a conversation that way, not from like, how much would it cost, or,
right.
what's the story with his birth mom, or,
Right.
That's like no one's business.
Thank you.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to LGBTQ plus couples or individuals who are overwhelmed by the idea of adoption?
So it's the same piece of advice I would give to anyone who is wanting to become a parent. And without sounding too self-serving, because I know that's what's going to come across as, I would say go to GWK Academy. Why? I mean, it's free. We literally created it to become known as the first stop at any, right now, gay man's journey to parenthood. But in 2025, we're going to expand it, and we're going to support the entire LGBTQ plus community and help everyone under the umbrella become parents. And what I think the most important thing is, first, do you even know what all your options are? Make sure you understand all your options. And we're going to blow out our content to a lot more so everyone will know their options. Choose the path that makes the most sense for you. Again, it's a very personal decision and it's deeply rooted in your own experiences. Which one talks to you? Once you're ready to get going, they're all going to sound overwhelming, quite frankly, because they all are overwhelming. So schedule a coaching call with us. Go through the course. Each course we have will take you through, 15 to 16 videos, mostly videos that take you through everything you need to know about that journey before you get started. Because when my husband and I were going on, we have kids through adoption and surrogacy. I can tell you, Levi's now 15 and a half, the girls are 14. So we did a long time ago. We had no clue what we were doing. I don't think we made a single decision feeling really confident that that was the right decision to be making. I don't want other people to feel that way. And so that's why we created GWK Academy. It's literally going to, once we add all this new stuff to it to support the entire LGBTQ plus community, it is going to be the only platform of its kind to support everyone with all paths of parenthood. So why won't you come here and get educated? And if you have questions, we have coaches to help you. And
And in support of that, I just want to say, everyone, when you decide to have a kid, everyone will have an opinion.
Yes.
Your parents will tell you how you should do it.
And after you have a kid, they will all have an opinion
then
too.
Everyone, even the stranger in the grocery store will tell you how to raise your child. Do not rely on other people's opinions and other people's thoughts and beliefs. Go and learn and get educated so you can make your own, because it is a deeply personal decision. that most people, there's so much mystery around it all. Most people are not going to have the right advice for you. You got to sit with it yourself.
And just to add to that, I always tell people, if you want to be a parent or you have that even like inkling of it, make a step, take a step tomorrow, right? Because it is such a process. Go to the Gays with Kids Academy, check it out, look at the resources, take the first step, because it's a process and it's not going to happen overnight. And if you have that inside you, start your journey. Do it.
Yeah, you guys just said something that I found very funny. The advice. So Ferd and I, we had 3 kids under the age of 2, so I'm sure we looked helpless as all could get up. But I will say we found that women, moms, in the early days when we had 3 kids, 3 babies, constantly coming up to us and helping us out. And often we kind of appreciate that because our families weren't around where we were living. But when I talk to straight people or to women, they said never in their lives has anyone, just stranger, volunteered to help out, or like literally go on a plane and the woman sitting in the back in the row behind us like, oh, let me go and help you carry the rest of the stuff in the plane. Like, or we're at a restaurant trying to feed the babies and someone would come, would you like some help with that? And we were always like, yeah, we'll take it. So I don't know if you experienced that at all.
Yeah, I think there is something about seeing men with a baby that, unfortunately, I think women with babies don't get the same response, and that is definitely shows a disparity.
Like the gender what people expect out of genders. Yeah.
But just to wrap things up, since we're gonna wrap things up now, I would love for you as an adoptive parent to talk about the experience you had of adopting your child. And I think most people have this misconception, which we've talked about, that somehow that child's not going to feel like yours because you weren't in the birthing room or you weren't there because you adopted the child. They're not genetically tied to you. Can you talk about a moment where you realized that this child actually is 100% yours?
Oh, yeah. So I could say it happened. So I need to disclaimer here. Neither my husband nor I, some people love the little infants and the newborns and they just they can't wait. That is not our thing. Like we go through that phase because you have to, but it's not our thing. So we had a dog first, a Chihuahua named Duke. He was our firstborn. And he's the reason we wanted to become parents, because we loved him so much. And we're like, we should become parents to people, not just to dogs. And I remember when we had someone come and help take care of Levi when he was like 3 or 4 days old. And so Ferd and I went out to dinner. And I'm like, so what do you think? And he's like, I don't know. What do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. Right now, I have to tell you, we're not getting the warms and fuzzies from him. Like Duke gives us a lot more warms and fuzzies. And I'm just exhausted all the time. And we said, let's just agree. We know that this is going to change. Let's agree that we'll tell each other as soon as it does. The next day, I held Levi, and I forget, I just looked at him a certain way, or he looked at me a certain way, and he cooed, and I just started crying, which I'll stop doing now. I just realized how much I loved him. And I'll tell you, the argument, the discussion that I hear about, biological children and adopted children, but not the same. It's just I could not possibly love Levi anymore, and I could not possibly love my girls anymore. They each own a piece of my heart and my husband's heart. And my husband, by the way, I'm the biological parent of our girls. You guys both know that it's no one's business. I'm very out about that because I'm also HIV positive. And so I want people who are positive to know they can become a dad biologically if they want to. He's an adoptive dad to all 3. And so there's no different. There's no difference. And in fact, Levi shares a lot of Ferd's personality traits. It's just they're 2 peas in a pod in many ways. And Sadie's my sister's, and Ella's a little bit of mine. So there's just, you can't imagine, I can't possibly love this kid any more than I do. There is absolutely no difference between how you feel about a child that you've adopted and a child that you gave birth to biologically. And you know what? I adopted Levi at birth, but I tell you right now, if I took over, adopted through the foster care system, got a kid, I know for a fact that within a very short time, they would own that same piece of real estate in my heart. That's how it is.
That's how it is.
That's so beautiful.
Steven's
I'm like
Right.
having such an emotional day as it is, and this is just like, it's beautiful.
Well, we can't thank you enough for coming and talking to us about this, and thank you enough for all you do for our community. I mean, it's so important.
Thank you.
I think there's so many people out there who don't realize how possible it is for them to have this dream come true, and I think you every single day make it seem possible for so many people. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I love, you guys have heard me say this before. Anyone who's giving visibility to our families, the more we especially now, we just need it. That's what changes people's hearts and minds. So I love the visibility you guys give to our families. And I love this podcast concept. So thank you.
So we want to give a big shout out to Brian for joining us today for this interview. We hope you got a lot of information out of it, and make sure you subscribe to our podcast, leave a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on.
And also go check out Gays with Kids if you have any other questions that you want answered.
And we'll talk to you in the next episode. We're going to talk to Lisa Schumann.
Lisa Schumann.
Lisa Schumann, it actually was our social worker
who
helped
yeah.
us in processing our surrogacy. Lisa Schumann is the founder of the Center for Family Building, and she is so in touch with the entire donor-conceived community. She knows so much about what donor conception between surrogacy versus IVF and all the other ways that unconventional families are built through donor conception. So it's a very interesting conversation. She's very knowledgeable. So you want to make sure you subscribe and don't miss the next episode.
See you there.